Today, there's a reunion being held at a local high-end restaurant to celebrate the 60th birthdays of my classmates. I was having a great time catching up with friends I hadn't seen in a while. Then, one of the classmates, called Jack, raised his voice. "Those living off pensions and broke can just leave." Jack was glaring at me. The friends around us looked surprised, but I wasn't shocked at all. Jack has always been the type to act this way towards those he considers beneath him. At that moment, classmates who attended the reunion said to him, "Hey, how could you not know?" Jack then turned pale. "My name is Daniel, and I'm 61 years old. I live with my wife and our son, who has already become independent. Our son lives alone, so it's just my wife and me at home. I retired from my company at 60 and moved back to the countryside where I was born and raised. Despite my son's objections, saying the city is more convenient for old age, my wife and I moved into this house left by my parents. Having been raised in the countryside, city life never suited me. On sunny days, I till the land and grow crops. On rainy days, I read at home. Living this life has been my dream for many years." "That sounds like a nice lifestyle," my wife, Emily, said, following me here. "We had never farmed before, but the neighbors taught us how to do it kindly. Among them, our neighbor George was especially kind. George, too, lives with his wife and is one of those who moved to the countryside after turning 60. Tomatoes don't like too much water, so don't water them too much." "Is that so?" For us, who knew nothing, every day was a continuous learning process. Emily, who was raised in the city, thought it would be hard to live here, but she ended up liking this lifestyle too. One day, George took me and Emily to a place. It was the local community center of this countryside town. Being in the countryside, it's important to participate in the community to interact with the neighbors, George taught us. Having lived in the city for about 43 years since leaving this countryside at 18, my wife and I had a life unfamiliar with neighborhood interactions, so it was refreshing. When we arrived at the community center, George urged us to go inside. Inside, several community members were already seated. Everyone looked at us, the newcomers, all at once. Emily whispered, "Is it okay for us to enter? It's kind of nerve-wracking," and grabbed my arm. I reassured her, "It's fine. This is the countryside where I grew up," and we went in together. When Emily and I found a place to sit, an elderly man spoke to me. "Isn't that Daniel? You've come back here." The elderly man was Alex. He was the one who taught me karate when I was a child. I was filled with nostalgia. "Alex, it's been a long time." Emily also greeted him lightly. "You've grown up so much and even have a beautiful wife now. I'm relieved. Let's keep in touch from now on." Alex said this and shook my hand. Then, the door of the community center burst open. "I'm sorry for being late. I was caught up with work." It was Jack. Seeing me seated, Jack looked surprised. I never expected to encounter Jack again, and I was so shocked that I lost my words. "What, you came back here?" Jack sneered as he looked at me. Feeling unsure how to respond, I honestly said, "I've retired and moved back here to celebrate turning 60. Are you a local resident, Jack?" Jack snorted in disdain. "I'm still actively working and even serving as the leader of the community. Unlike you, I'm not useless." Jack made a condescending remark. "Jack is the leader of this community. No way." I couldn't believe Jack's words. And Jack's rude attitude didn't stop. "So, you're living off a pension? Hey, are you too poor to even pay the community fees?" Emily was taken aback by Jack's words, her eyes wide. The other residents seemed shocked as well. Jack has always been like this. His parents worked in the city, so compared to the rest of his classmates, he lived a more affluent life. As a result, the clothes he wore and the things he had were always new, drawing everyone's attention. Moreover, he always flaunted them, looking down on me who only wore hand-me-downs from my brother. "You're always wearing rag clothes. So lame. Don't you have anything better to wear, you poor thing? Stay away from me." Jack always called me poor and excluded me from the group. Each time, it hurt my heart. Wanting to avoid further hurt, I started avoiding Jack, but he kept picking on me. "Hey, don't ignore me. You've got some nerve to ignore me like this." Jack was extremely arrogant. Reaching my limit, I raised my voice at Jack during our middle school graduation. "Cut it out, will you? Why are you so mean to me?" Then, Jack laughed and said, "I just hate poor people." Hearing those words, I resolved never to involve myself with Jack again. Yet, to meet him here of all places, I must be really unlucky. I could only sigh. I have savings and a pension, so I can pay the community fees just fine. No need to worry, I said to Jack, trying to keep my irritation in check. However, Jack glared at me, saying, "I'm paying taxes with the money I've earned through hard work. Show some gratitude." The residents watching our exchange seemed taken aback. Then, Alex spoke up quietly. "Hey, Jack, you might be working now, but soon you'll be on a pension too, right? There's no need for such nastiness, is there?" Alex admonished Jack in a low voice. Jack seemed unconvinced but couldn't talk back to Alex, the elder, and just clicked his tongue. "Daniel, just don't cause any trouble for everyone in the community. You're just a high school graduate and incompetent." "There's no way I'd cause trouble. Even if I'm just a high school graduate, I'll do my part properly." I felt my body trembling with anger. Why has Jack always been so mean-spirited? Emily beside me was completely looking down. Ignoring my irritation, Jack stepped forward to speak. "Today, we need to decide who will be in charge of cleaning the park tomorrow." Jack made an unbelievable statement. Usually, we ask people to clean in turns, but this time, I thought we'd ask those who are free because they're living off pensions. The community center buzzed with whispers. In this rural town, many residents live on pensions. It was unbelievable that he would make such a statement. Moreover, just because someone is living off a pension doesn't mean they're idle. What on earth is this man talking about? Then, Alex raised his voice. "Calling those living on pensions idle is too disrespectful. I'm on a pension too, but at my age, cleaning every day is hard." Jack just laughed. "It's not about you, Alex. You're elderly, after all. I was thinking of asking the idle Daniel to take on the cleaning duty." Emily and I were in disbelief. We couldn't understand why we, who had just joined the community, had to be assigned cleaning duty. As I looked puzzled, Jack immediately glared at me. "You're not working anyway, and you must be bored at home, right? Take this chance to clean up the town." I was too angry to speak and just nodded. Emily felt the same. After a while, when the community meeting ended, Emily and I wanted to leave the community center before Jack could say anything else, so we started to run. But Jack stood in our way as if to block our path. "Also, create this document and insert it into the circular notice. Make sure it's done by tomorrow." I couldn't stay silent any longer at Jack's words. Isn't this a bit too forceful? Isn't creating the circular notice the leader's job? We have to do the cleaning as well. Then Jack glared at me again. "What? Talking back to me? Do you think you're so important?" Jack crossed his arms and raised his voice. I raised my voice too, not wanting to be outdone. "Aren't we ex-classmates? There's no superior or inferior among us." "What are you talking about? I graduated from a prestigious university and am now a manager at a major company. On the other hand, you are unemployed and living on a pension. There's a world of difference between you and me. Don't lump us together." Jack seemed determined to treat me as an unemployed pauper. My second life in the countryside, which I had looked forward to, was ruined because of Jack. Without saying anything, Emily took the circular notice documents and said, "Let's go home quickly." I ignored Jack and went home. Upon arriving home, Emily started to get angry. "What is Jack so rude? Saying you're incompetent, living off a pension, and poor. How could he say such things?" I was surprised. Emily is usually gentle and rarely gets angry. "I'm sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." When I apologized, Emily shook her head. "You didn't do anything wrong. Let's enjoy living in the countryside together." Emily comforted me. From the next day, we were busy with community activities. After breakfast, Emily and I arrived at the designated park. This park is the largest in the countryside, even including a sports ground. Are we supposed to clean this huge park, just the two of us? Surprised, I started cleaning with Emily. Initially, I was irritated by Jack's high-handed attitude, but as I cleaned, I felt refreshed, as if my mind was being cleansed. While we were quietly picking up trash, George came in his jogging suit. "I'll help out. Usually, more people clean this park, so it will take a lot of time with just the two of you." Saying that, George started putting trash into the garbage bag. "George, thank you so much. We really appreciate it." Emily and I were touched by George's kindness. Then, Alex came along, saying, "I don't know if an old man like me will be of much use, but I can at least pick up trash." "Thank you." As the four of us picked up trash, Jack became the topic of conversation. I always knew he had a bad attitude, but to be that bad is just hopeless. "Exactly. He's too rude to you, Daniel." Both seemed unable to forgive Jack's disrespectful behavior. Even when electing the leader, he nominated himself but doesn't participate in any community events because they're a hassle. And to make demeaning remarks about those living on pensions is unforgivable. Don't you have anything to say about it? Alex looked at me. I laughed and said, "Jack has always been like that, so I'm used to it by now." It seemed like Alex and George were surprised by my words. Thanks to the help of our two friends, we were able to finish much earlier than planned. "Thank you so much. It's all clean now because of you two. Would you like to come over for some coffee as a thank you?" Emily said, and both nodded happily. We arrived home and served coffee and sweets on the porch. Alex and George enjoyed the treats with relish. I loved these leisurely moments in the countryside. Sitting on the porch always brought back old memories. Alex, with a smile, asked me, "Daniel, what made you decide to come back here?" I have been working in the city ever since graduating from high school and was mentally and physically exhausted. I had made up my mind to move to the countryside once I retired. Fortunately, Emily agreed with me, so here we are, I replied. George nodded and added, "I came here for the exact same reasons as you, Daniel. This place has charms that the city lacks." We four were having a great time. However, at that moment, we spotted Jack walking down the street in front of our house. I almost dropped my coffee in surprise. The four of us fell silent and looked down. We could roughly guess what Jack would say if our eyes met. But the next moment, Jack looked at us and laughed. "What's this? A gathering of pensioners?" We pretended not to hear Jack's voice and ignored him. Then, Jack got angry. "Are you ignoring the words of the community leader? Living off people's taxes and still acting like this? That's why I can't stand poor people." At Jack's words, George's face turned red with anger. "We've paid our taxes too in the past. How can you speak like that? Who do you think you are, Jack?" Alex and I tried desperately to calm George down, but his anger didn't subside. Jack, too, was shaking with rage. As a community leader, I'm working for this countryside. You have no right to criticize me. If you're so upset, try working at a major company like I do. Jack left in anger. Jack really thinks highly of himself, doesn't he? It's truly unpleasant, Emily remarked. George, it's best not to mind Jack. He's always been like that. Worrying about him is a waste of time and energy, I advised. George nodded at my words, but he seemed disheartened. For a while, we didn't encounter Jack, and peaceful days continued. Emily and I, along with creating the circular notice documents, gardening, and having coffee with George and his wife, were enjoying our time. However, we hadn't realized that this was the calm before the storm. One morning, I went to fetch the newspaper that had been delivered to the mailbox. Just then, I saw George from the neighboring house coming out with a large cardboard box in his arms. Curious, I called out to him. George, is something wrong? Hearing my voice, George looked at me with a lack of energy. Actually, the landlord suddenly told us to leave. I was shocked to hear George's words. I immediately asked him why, and his answer shocked me even more. It seems Jack had something to do with persuading the landlord behind the scenes. I was at a loss for words. I knew Jack was bad, but I didn't realize he was this bad. That's unacceptable. I'll go talk to Jack about this. It's okay. I don't want to have anything to do with him anymore. George looked utterly exhausted. Do you have a place to move to yet? George quietly shook his head at my question. Because we were told to leave just 2 days ago. For now, we're thinking of going to my wife's parents' place, George said. I felt a deep disdain for Jack. Jack is not human. I was infuriated beyond words. After that, George and his wife drove away in a small truck. I stood there, rooted to the spot until the truck was out of sight. Worried that I hadn't returned after going out to get the newspaper, Emily came outside. When I told her about George, her eyes widened in shock. I can't believe it. Exactly. Emily and I lived with a sense of loneliness without George for a while. Then, Emily and I decided on something. We resolved to leave the community group. We knew well that leaving the community group in the countryside might lead to being looked at unfavorably, but we absolutely did not want to have anything more to do with Jack. When I told Jack about our decision to leave, he laughed loudly and said, I guess the community fees were too much for you, huh? But I no longer had the desire to talk to Jack and completely ignored him. He continued to grumble something in the background, but Emily and I walked away without paying any attention and went home. From that point on, our countryside life became even more enjoyable. Because we no longer had to worry about Jack. Since we started our countryside life, our first autumn arrived. True to the phrase of fruitful autumn, our garden's chestnut tree began to bear many chestnuts. And then, I received a postcard. The postcard was inscribed with an announcement for a middle school reunion. Additionally, it mentioned a celebration of our 60th birthdays. Emily peered over and said, the venue is a high-end restaurant. How lovely, but honestly, I wasn't keen on going. Because I thought Jack would likely attend the reunion. However, Emily told me, we don't know how many more chances we'll get to meet our classmates. Just ignore Jack and go. Considering we were all past our 60th birthdays, I thought Emily was right. I decided to attend. On the day of the reunion, I changed into the clothes Emily had prepared for me. Having Emily pick out my suits since my working days, this familiar scene made my heart flutter. Emily smiled at me and said, I hope your reunion with your classmates will be a joyful time. I put on my shoes and left the house. I felt a bit awkward in my seldom worn suit, but I was looking forward to meeting my classmates. I took the bus and got off near the high-end restaurant, then walked the rest of the way. The restaurant had an imposing gate, and I felt a bit nervous entering. I was led to a room at the back, where several classmates were already chatting. The table was set with a lavish course meal that all looked delicious. I looked around. Jack hadn't arrived yet. I hoped it would stay peaceful if Jack didn't show up. As I took my seat, my classmates started talking to me nostalgically. "It's been so long. You've completely turned into an old man." That's true for both of us, isn't it? We enjoyed light-hearted conversations, feeling as if we had returned to our middle school days. When I mentioned that I had retired, my classmates looked at me with envy. "Retired? I envy you. I'm planning to work until I'm 70. I've been working for 43 years, so I'm just tired now." "Daniel, you were always the hardest worker among us." While I was enjoying the conversation with my classmates, the room door swung open and Jack walked in. Jack was dressed in a fine suit. Seeing me seated, Jack clearly had a puzzled look on his face. Surprisingly, he chose to sit right across from me. "Who invited Daniel here? He's living off his pension and doesn't have money. The courses here are expensive." The classmates thought Jack was joking and laughed. However, I couldn't stand Jack belittling me at this joyous occasion. "Hey, Jack, it's a day of celebration, so let's not spoil the mood with such comments, all right?" Hearing my words, Jack burst out laughing. "What are you talking about? Your mere presence here is ruining the atmosphere." The classmates suddenly fell silent. They must have realized Jack wasn't joking. One classmate, unable to watch anymore, told Jack, "What are you saying, Jack? Let's just have a good time." But Jack seemed displeased with my earlier comment and kept making snide remarks towards me. "You know the saying, no rest for the poor. There are companies that would hire you even after 60, so go work." Every time Jack made a snide remark, the room fell silent, and an uneasy atmosphere prevailed. I had reached my limit. Enough. Today is supposed to be a joyous occasion where we classmates reunite. If all you can do is judge me, then leave. Jack's face turned red with anger upon hearing my words. The one who should leave is not me but you. Pensioners and poor folks should just leave." "Jack, Daniel is not poor." The classmates looked pale. Then, it happened. "Excuse me." The restaurant's owner, Charles, entered the room with a lavish dish. Puzzled, one classmate said to Charles, "We didn't order this." Charles, looking at me, said, "Daniel has been a great help to us, so this is just a small token of our appreciation." Seeing Charles's face, I said, "Charles, you've already thanked me more than enough, and you don't have to worry about it anymore." But Charles shook his head. "That's not passable. Thanks to you, we've been able to keep this restaurant running." Thanks to Daniel." Jack looked confused. Charles, with a puzzled look, said, "You're being rude. If it weren't for Daniel, this restaurant wouldn't exist." Then, disbelievingly, Jack retorted, "You're thanked even for something. It might rain tomorrow." The classmates laughed. "So, it's going to rain every day then?" I can't believe such a poor person would be thanked. I understand if someone working in a big company like me is thanked, but him." Interrupting Jack, a classmate said, "Hey, how do you not know?" "About what?" "Daniel isn't poor. He's wealthier than any of us." Jack looked at me incredulously. Charles spoke up. "Daniel used to be the president of Bank A." Jack's face turned pale. "Daniel was the president of that major bank. That can't be true." Charles raised his voice. "You're really being rude." Daniel helped this restaurant with financing when other banks abandoned us, and he's lent a helping hand to other businesses as well. It's unbelievable that you treat him as poor." Jack was desperately wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. He seemed to panic to put his feelings into words. "Indeed, I was once the president of Bank A, the largest bank in the region. When I first joined the bank through a high school graduate program, my superiors and peers looked down on me, much like how Jack is doing now. I was treated as incompetent by my direct supervisor and constantly told by my peers that my incompetence was due to my lower education. However, quitting now would mean admitting defeat. And that was something I absolutely wanted to avoid. Once I had made up my mind, I wanted to see it through to the end with full responsibility. So, I persevered and asked my condescending supervisor for advice on how to work, even though he despised me. To prove my peers wrong, who kept calling me undereducated, I studied hard every day. I arrived at the office earlier than anyone else and did everything I could, including cleaning and odd jobs. Gradually, I gained strength, and even the supervisor, who had looked down on me, began to rely on me. 30 years after joining the company, I was approved at the shareholders' meeting to become the president of Bank A. Despite all the employees being elite graduates from prestigious universities, it was unanimously decided that I would be the president. I was truly surprised when I was approached about becoming the president. Typically, presidents come from prestigious universities. When I hesitated, the previous president, Mr. Anderson, said to me, "You are the only one fit to be the president of this bank, Daniel. It doesn't matter what your academic background is. What's important for a president is how much you can work for the bank." Hearing these words made me truly happy. It felt like my efforts up until now were being recognized. I dedicated myself to my work, keeping Mr. Anderson's words close to my heart. The bank thrives thanks to the people and companies in the community. Therefore, I wanted to be of some help to them. I actively participated in loan discussions, which presidents usually do not attend, and provided loans to struggling businesses and residents. The companies I loaned to became more profitable and deposited significant amounts of money in Bank A. Thanks to this, Bank A grew even larger. People who received loans thanked me with tears in their eyes, and when they ran into me on the street, they thanked me with a smile. This alone made me proud of my work. I was indeed the president of Bank A, but that's all in the past. I have no intention of boasting about it now, I said. My classmates applauded my words. Then, one of them said, "Isn't Jack's company in partnership with Bank A? It would be wise not to be disrespectful to Daniel anymore." Jack's face turned even paler. At that moment, Jack's phone rang loudly. With a feeble voice, Jack answered the phone. "Hello, what do you mean? I'm being demoted." Jack was thrown into a panic. The classmates watching nearby wondered what was happening as they looked at Jack. After hanging up, Jack looked at me and started to apologize. "Daniel, I was wrong in everything I said and did. Please forgive me." "Jack, it's too late now. No matter how much you apologize, the hurt you caused me remains," I replied. No way." The reason Jack apologized to me was probably because I had inadvertently discussed Jack's behavior with President Johnson of his company during a drinking party. During my time as president, I had provided a significant loan to Jack's company. Since then, I had become drinking buddies with Mr. Johnson. When I discussed Jack's lack of common sense with Mr. Johnson, he clearly looked perplexed. He was angry, saying that he didn't need such an employee in his company. The call Jack received was probably from Mr. Johnson, informing him of his demotion. Afterward, Jack quietly despaired, seemingly unable to hear anyone else. The classmates I hadn't seen in a long time were just as they had always been, and we had a great time together. The day after the reunion, I went outside to do some morning exercises. There was Jack, coming to apologize. Both Emily and I were so surprised that we were at a loss for words. "Please, can you ask Mr. Johnson of my company not to demote me? I've worked hard for the company. Being demoted at this age is just too harsh." As I struggled to respond, my neighbor, George, shouted out. Jack looked at George as if he had seen a ghost. "Hey, cut it out. You've been terrible to Daniel all this time, and it's too late to start acting differently now. Why are you even here? Weren't you told by the landlord to leave?" Jack is bewildered. "Actually, I once provided a loan to the landlord of the house next door, so I asked the landlord to let George live in the house again." Jack is astonished. I locked eyes with Jack, who was apologizing. "Like I said yesterday, I have no intention of helping you. You must have stepped on many people to get to where you are. Start over from scratch, and this time, don't drag others into it." At my words, Jack broke down crying on the spot. But no one tried to help Jack. 6 months later, Jack voluntarily resigned before being demoted to a regional office. Despite having looked down on pensioners as poor, Jack is now living on a pension himself. In the community, residents who couldn't stand Jack's arrogant ways drove him out. With his behavior, it's no wonder he was driven out. It's his own fault that he's now leading a quiet and lonely retirement. As for me, I continue to live in the countryside. My garden has grown quite impressive. I plan to keep enjoying this pleasant rural life with Emily.